We live in a world where the word freedom sounds almost like a spell. Everyone wants to be free. Everyone strives for independence. But if you look closely, most of us are not free at all. We call freedom the ability to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and with whomever we want. But is that true freedom? The Stoics would say no, because behind this desire often hides slavery. Slavery to one's own passions, emotions, and endless needs. Think about it. Are you really free if your day can be ruined by a single word from someone else? Are you really free if your happiness depends on likes, money, or approval? Are you really free if your mind keeps returning again and again to fears about the future or regrets about the past? The Stoics taught that a slave is not the one held in chains, but the one who does not master himself. True freedom is not an escape from rules or the breaking of boundaries, but an inner state in which you are the master of yourself. No insult, no loss, no accident can destroy you. You remain whole because you govern yourself instead of giving power to circumstances. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is not master of himself." And in this simple phrase lies the key to true independence. For what good are all external blessings if you remain a prisoner of your own weaknesses? A person may live in wealth, travel the world, enjoy power and success, but if he is a slave to his desires, he is not free. On the other hand, a person may sit in a small room, have no power over others, but if he masters himself, he is already free. True freedom does not begin with external change, but with inner discipline. This does not mean suppressing yourself, it means directing yourself. A free person is someone who chooses his thoughts, governs his reactions, and keeps calm in the face of what is beyond his control. And this is exactly what the Stoics called us to. Today we will explore why the usual understanding of freedom often deceives us, how true freedom differs from illusion, and how step by step we can learn to master ourselves, stop being prisoners of our own emotions, and gain inner strength that does not depend on the world, on people, or on chance. We are used to thinking that freedom is when there are no restrictions around us, when we can do anything at any time, when no one dares to dictate to us how to live, and we fully belong to ourselves. Modern culture seems to push us toward this view. Freedom is maximum independence, the satisfaction of all desires, the ability to choose any pleasure. But if we stop and think, it is precisely this understanding that turns us into slaves. Because the more we allow desires to control us, the less remains of true freedom. The Stoics saw this clearly. A person may seem independent, but be a prisoner of passion, addiction, or habit. Slavery does not always look like shackles or prison walls. Most often, slavery is hidden, disguised as what we call freedom. Look at a person who chases approval. He may say he is free since he chooses what to do and where to go. But in reality, every step he takes is determined by fear of judgment or hunger for praise. He does not belong to himself. He lives in the captivity of other people's opinions. The Stoics said that a slave is the one who cannot master himself. And this slavery is the hardest of all because it is invisible and feels natural. We think we act by our own will, but in truth we are led by someone else's word, someone else's look, someone else's reaction. Another form of the illusion of freedom is dependence on pleasures. We believe that to enjoy is to be free, but the more we grow used to pleasures, the more they begin to control us. Food, entertainment, shopping, virtual amusements. All of this promises instant happiness, but gradually a person can no longer live without it. He becomes dependent, and any deprivation turns into suffering. Is that freedom? The Stoics would say no, it is slavery to passions. True freedom does not fear loss, but dependence on pleasure makes us prisoners of fear. What if I don't get this anymore? What if it becomes unavailable to me? Such a person is not the master of his desires. He is their slave. There is also a third form of false freedom: habits. At first glance, habits make life easier, give rhythm and predictability. But if a person is unable to change his habit, if every day he acts automatically and does not notice how these actions control his life, then where is the freedom? Look at someone who reaches for the screen every evening, not because he wants to, but because he is used to it. He says he is free, but try to take away this habit from him, and he will feel like he is losing a part of himself. True freedom does not fear change. While a habit turned into chains robs us of choice, the Stoics understood all of this is a form of slavery that people mistake for freedom. We think, I choose for myself, but in reality, that choice is dictated by emotions, desires, and fears. The slavery Epictetus spoke of is not about external chains. It is about the fact that a person inside does not govern himself. How many people are proud that they live as they want, yet cannot go a single day without social media, without alcohol, without compulsive work or constant entertainment? They believe they are free, but in truth they cannot give up what controls them. The Stoics taught, freedom is the ability to say yes or no to any impulse, not to obey automatically, but to choose consciously. And here lies the difference between the illusion of freedom and true freedom. Illusion says, do what you want and no one has the right to interfere. True freedom says, you can, but choose what is truly worthy of you. Illusion promises ease but leads to dependence. True freedom requires discipline, but grants strength. The illusion of freedom fascinates because it is simple. Follow your desires, but desires have no bottom, and a person quickly realizes he has become their slave. True freedom is harder. It requires effort to discern what depends on us and what does not, what is useful and what is destructive, what is worthy and what is not. But it is this discernment that makes us strong and calm. Think about it. What controls you most often? How many decisions do you make not because they are your conscious choice, but because they are familiar, pleasant, safe, or accepted in society? How many times have you acted against yourself just out of fear of judgment? How many times have you been unable to give up what harms you simply because the desire was stronger? In these moments, it becomes clear. The freedom we talk about is often nothing more than an illusion. The Stoics taught us to see the truth behind the facade. They said, if you depend on pleasures, you are their slave. If you depend on approval, you are a slave to opinions. If you do not govern your habits, you are a slave to yourself. But here is the good news. This slavery can be broken. It is not external, it is internal. And that means the key to liberation lies in our own hands. But the first step always begins with awareness. Freedom without inner control is not freedom, but the subtlest and most treacherous form of slavery. When we understand this, we already begin the movement toward true independence, because we stop believing in the deceptive promises of doing whatever you want and begin to search for a deeper meaning. And in this search, Stoic wisdom becomes our guide. If the false understanding of freedom leads us to the slavery of passions and habits, the Stoic perspective points us in an entirely different direction. True freedom is not about what we can or cannot do in the external world. It is born within. It is the state in which you are not ruled by emotions, circumstances, or the opinions of others, when your mind remains clear and steady regardless of what happens around you. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is not master of himself." This phrase sounds like a challenge because it overturns the familiar idea. It turns out that freedom is not about doing whatever you want, but about mastering yourself so deeply that no desire can master you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "He is free who lives content with the present and does not fear the future." This too is a key thought. A person ceases to be a prisoner when he no longer depends on fantasies about what should happen and no longer wastes life on regrets about what is already gone. Freedom is the ability to be here and now, accepting reality as it is, and choosing actions out of inner calm, not out of fear or greed. Why did the Stoics connect freedom with discipline? Because discipline is the tool that frees the mind from chaos. When you train yourself to distinguish between what depends on you and what does not, you stop being a plaything of chance. People may praise or condemn you. Your plans may collapse or succeed. Fortune may smile or turn away. But none of this makes you a slave if your soul does not depend on the external. The Stoics taught, it is inner discipline that allows you to maintain control over yourself where external control is impossible. A person without discipline is like a ship without a rudder, tossed by the waves of circumstances. Every action he takes is determined by external forces, what others say, what passions dictate, what pleasures promise. He believes he is free because no one openly holds him in chains. But in reality, he is always enslaved by others' words, his own weaknesses, his own fear. But a disciplined person is like a captain holding the rudder firmly even as the sea rages. He cannot stop the storm, but he can govern himself, and in that lies his strength. True freedom is not freedom from everything. It is freedom within any condition. That is why the Stoics valued moderation, restraint, and clarity of thought. They understood, if you cannot say no to your desires, they become your masters. If you cannot endure pain or deprivation, you become a slave to fear. If you live for praise, you are captive to the opinions of others. But if you master yourself, then you are free even in chains. Epictetus, once a slave, spoke of this not as a philosophical metaphor, but as personal experience. He was shackled physically, but remained inwardly free because he knew no one could force him to think or judge against his will. Here lies the paradox of Stoic freedom. It does not require changes in the external world. It requires change within yourself. This does not mean the Stoics denied external circumstances or considered them unimportant. They saw them as a field for practice. The world will always bring difficulties, losses, trials. But it is precisely these events that test who you are. If you can remain whole despite pain or deprivation, if you can preserve dignity in injustice, if you can rejoice without fear of loss, then you have mastered yourself. And that is freedom. It is important to understand, inner freedom is not cold indifference. It is not rejection of life or escape from emotions. It is the ability to experience them without becoming their slave. A person may feel joy, sorrow, love, anger, but if he remains the master of these feelings rather than their prisoner, then he is free. The Stoics taught not to suppress emotions, but to govern them, to look at them clearly, and to choose how to respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations. The life of each man is what he makes of his thoughts, and in this phrase lies the essence of Stoic freedom. No one can take away your right to choose how you think about what is happening. This power cannot be taken away by war, poverty, or illness. But to use it, discipline is required. The ability to direct your attention, the ability not to succumb to the first impulse, the ability to keep your mind clear. Without this, we inevitably slip into slavery to circumstances. Modern humans feel the illusion of freedom especially sharply. Never before have we had so many possibilities, so much choice, so much access to pleasures. Yet at the same time, people have never been so tired, anxious, and dependent. We are surrounded by comfort, but we are not free. Why? Because we are led not by reason and discipline, but by emotions and habits. Stoic wisdom reminds us, true freedom is not in having everything, but in being able to be content with what you have, not in avoiding suffering, but in learning not to fear it, not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius agreed on one thing. Freedom begins with inner acceptance of reality. You cannot change the world by your will, but you can change your attitude toward it. You cannot control the future, but you can stop fearing it. You cannot reclaim the past, but you can stop being its prisoner. And in this clarity lies what all philosophers sought, a state of inner peace that no one can destroy. But it is worth noting that freedom requires effort. It is not given freely. It cannot be bought with money, nor obtained by birthright. It is created by discipline, the daily practice of self-governance, the habit of distinguishing what depends on you and what does not, the habit of examining your desires and not letting them command you, the habit of being grateful for what you have now. At first glance, this may seem like limitation, but in reality, it is liberation. Discipline does not remove joy. It removes unnecessary chains. It returns power over yourself, and with it comes true freedom. Stoic philosophy offers a simple truth. Freedom is an inner fortress that no storm can destroy, and anyone willing to master themselves can build it. If we already understand that true freedom is born not in external circumstances, but within a person, the next step is to understand how this freedom is built, what it rests on, and how it manifests in our life. The Stoics believe that the path to genuine inner freedom lies through self-control. And this control can be divided into three levels: thoughts, desires, and actions. Everything else is beyond our influence, so expending effort to fight the world is meaningless. But what we can truly hold in our hands, our thinking, our striving, and our behavior, constitutes the foundation of freedom. The first level is thoughts. A person can lose everything: wealth, status, health, even physical freedom. But his thoughts are always his own, and therein lies his greatest strength. The Stoics taught that how we interpret events is more important than the events themselves. For an event is neutral in itself. Its color is what we give it. Loss of money can be a catastrophe, or it can be a lesson. Illness can be torment, or it can be a trial that strengthens character. An insult can humiliate, or it can remind you that others' words have no power over your dignity. And here begins freedom. When a person understands that the power over his inner state belongs to him alone, Controlling your thoughts means not letting first impulses seize your mind. It is the ability to step back and ask, does this depend on me? How do I want to view this? Is it useful for me to succumb to this mood now? When we choose calm instead of anger, rational acceptance instead of despair, we cease to be a plaything of the external world. The second level is desires. A person can be judged by what he seeks. Many think freedom is following every desire, but the Stoics saw in this slavery. If your desires can be controlled externally by advertising, praise, or fear of punishment, then you are not the master of your life. Freedom begins where you yourself decide which desires are worthy of fulfillment. The Stoics taught to distinguish. There are natural and necessary desires, food, water, rest, and there are false ones. Thirst for wealth, vanity, pursuit of power. If a person becomes a slave to false desires, he will never be satisfied because these desires are endless. But if he limits himself to only what is necessary, he is already free. Controlling desires means not letting them control you, but choosing which pursuits to follow and which to leave aside. A simple example, a person may crave pleasures, but if he can say to himself, enough, he remains free. He may fear pain, but if he does not let fear dictate his actions, he retains his strength. Instead of fear, he chooses courage. Instead of dependence, conscious choice. This is not a rejection of life, but the ability to live it mindfully, without constantly chasing what truly does not matter. The third level is actions. Thoughts and desires remain in the soul, but it is actions that reveal who we truly are. Controlling your actions means directing them in accordance with reason and virtue. The Stoics taught that every action should arise from two things: alignment with nature and benefit to society. In other words, one should live not only for oneself, but in harmony with people in the world. A person who acts impulsively under the influence of fear or passion ceases to be free. He is like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. But one who chooses actions consciously, based on a clear understanding of good and evil, gains power. It is important to understand, self-control is not suppression. It is not a harsh inner warden that forbids everything and turns life into a prison. It is more like a wise captain who holds the course, knowing that the wind and wave will change direction. Sometimes you have to go against the current. Sometimes you must use its strength. But the captain always remembers where he is headed, and this is what makes him free. Similarly, a person who controls his thoughts, desires, and actions does not live in fear or rigid asceticism. He lives in harmony, where every decision arises from inner order. And inner order is freedom. Looking at these three levels together, it becomes clear that they are interconnected. Thoughts shape desires, desires generate actions, actions solidify habits, and habits form character. Conversely, by controlling actions, we gradually influence desires, and by controlling desires, we influence thoughts. This is a cycle, but a cycle that can be closed in the right direction. Stoic practice is built on gradually clearing one's thoughts, disciplining desires, and directing actions. For example, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily in his writings that his thoughts must remain clear and simple, his desires limited to what is rational, and his actions beneficial to others. In this way, he created an inner order that remained unshaken even as the Roman Empire crumbled around him. Freedom, as the Stoics understood it, does not mean the absence of boundaries. On the contrary, it is built on boundaries that a person sets for himself. If he does not limit his thoughts, they will wander chaotically and torment him. If he does not limit his desires, he becomes a slave to their endless cravings. If he does not limit his actions, he becomes a victim of circumstances. But if he sets the boundaries himself, they become not a prison, but support. Just as the walls of a house do not prevent living, but protect against wind and cold, inner discipline does not hinder joy, but makes it stable. It is also important to emphasize that self-control is not a one-time effort, but a lifelong process. One cannot simply say, "Now I am free," and stop. Each day brings new challenges, temptations, and fears, and every day requires a choice. But it is this constant choice that makes us stronger. Just as muscles grow through exercise, so too the strength of the spirit grows through the practice of self-control. This is the path of the Stoic, aware that the ideal is unattainable, yet striving toward it already brings strength and freedom. Modern humans can apply this just as the ancients did. When choosing calm instead of anger, one gains strength. When choosing courage instead of fear, one becomes liberated. When choosing conscious choice instead of dependence, one becomes the master of his own life. These three levels of control become both shield and weapon in a world that constantly seeks to govern us. And they create what the Stoics called true freedom. Inner order, independent of external chaos. Freedom in the modern world may seem obvious, as we live in times when most people have the right to choose their profession, the ability to travel, access to information, and the formal ability to shape their lives as they wish. But a closer look reveals that modern humans are far from free, because freedom is not only about external conditions, but primarily about an inner state. We are surrounded by things, technology, and promises of an easy life, yet these often become our new chains. The Stoics reminded us that freedom begins where we stop being slaves to passions, fears, and external influence. Viewed through this lens, it is clear that many people live under the illusion of freedom, while in reality they are bound more tightly than those in ancient chains. One major source of modern enslavement is dependence on technology. We hold a smartphone that gives access to information from around the world. Yet this same device robs us of focus, steals hours of our lives, and manipulates our emotions. We receive notifications, likes, and news, reacting instantly like puppets on strings. This is not freedom. We are led where the algorithm wants, not where we choose to go. Stoic wisdom teaches a simple lesson here. Freedom begins when we can control our attention. If a person chooses how to spend his time and thoughts, he is free. If he merely responds to external stimuli, he is a prisoner even when formally free. Another form of modern unfreedom is dependence on the opinions of others. In the age of social media, we live on stage. Every post, photo, and comment becomes subject to judgment. Increasingly, people live to please others rather than in harmony with themselves. This is the trap the Stoics warned about. A slave is not the one physically restrained, but the one who cannot master his desire for others' approval. Freedom comes when a person understands that others' opinions are fleeting, changing as quickly as the wind, and it is meaningless to build life on them. True value lies in inner agreement with oneself, the ability to act according to one's principles rather than the expectations of the crowd. The third form of unfreedom is the cult of consumption. Modern humans often measure their lives by things: cars, phones, clothing, status symbols. But the Stoics said that things in themselves are neutral. They do not make us happy and they do not make us free. If we are dependent on things, if we lose confidence without them, we become slaves. Only those who can use things without clinging to them are free. This does not mean giving up comforts, but it does mean remembering that they do not define your worth. The Stoics taught that true wealth is being content with little, not accumulating endless desires. The modern world makes this even more complicated because the consumer system is designed to create new desires, new standards, new must-have items each time. And this is where it becomes especially important to reclaim freedom by learning to distinguish what is truly needed from what is imposed. Another form of unfreedom is fear of the future. A world of rapid changes, crises, and uncertainty makes a person anxious. What will happen tomorrow? Will I cope? Will I lose my job, health, or relationships? We make plans and strive for stability, but deep down we understand that the future cannot be controlled. This generates constant fatigue and fear. The Stoics taught that freedom comes not when the future is guaranteed, but when a person learns to be content with the present. He who is content with the present and does not fear the future is free, wrote Marcus Aurelius. Modern people can find an answer in this. We cannot predict or hold on to everything, but we can choose each day how to live today. If we can be here and now, no uncertainty can take away our inner peace. Thus, the modern world, despite all its conveniences and external freedoms, creates new chains, often stronger than the old ones. And this is precisely where Stoic philosophy becomes especially relevant, as it reminds us that freedom is an internal state, independent of technology, opinions, possessions, and the future. Free is the one who controls himself. Free is the one who can let go of the unnecessary. Free is the one who sees the difference between what depends on him and what does not. Modern life will constantly try to pull us in different directions. New trends, new fears, new promises. But if we remember the Stoic principle, freedom begins with self-control. We can live in this world without becoming its prisoners. Then freedom ceases to be a slogan or a political right and becomes a personal experience, a state of mind and soul. The practice of self-mastery in the Stoic sense was never about abstract ideas or lofty reasoning. It was always about concrete exercises that could be applied daily. The Stoics believed philosophy was not a theoretical science, but an art of living, and learning self-control should be approached like any other discipline, through repetition, attention, and awareness. The first exercise Stoics recommended was dividing everything that happens into mine and not mine. Epictetus said there are things that depend on us and things that do not. Mine are my thoughts, my decisions, my actions. Everything else, other people's words, behavior, events, illnesses, fortunes and misfortunes, is not mine. The practice involves asking yourself daily when facing difficulties, is this mine or not mine? If it is within my power, I can act. If it is not, I must accept and let go. This skill frees us from unnecessary suffering because we stop wasting energy on what is beyond our control. The second Stoic exercise is the morning reminder. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that each day should begin with the awareness. Today I will encounter ungrateful, evil, envious, selfish people. But this should not surprise or break me, because they act out of ignorance of good. This practice helps prepare the mind for the day's challenges, so events do not catch us off guard. The morning reminder is a kind of psychological armor, giving us the ability to respond calmly to what would otherwise provoke irritation or resentment. By expecting difficulties and meeting them with readiness, we maintain control over ourselves. The third exercise is the evening review. At the end of the day, Stoics recommended conducting an internal judgment of oneself. Epictetus said to ask in the evening, "Where was I true to myself today, and where did I yield to passions?" Seneca also wrote that he reviewed his actions each evening to observe progress or mistakes. This ritual is not meant to punish or induce guilt, but to see where we truly held control and where we surrendered it to circumstances. Such reflection gradually strengthens inner discipline. By noticing how often we succumb to anger, fear, or dependence, we begin consciously working to maintain self-control next time. The evening exercise is a way to connect the day with wisdom, so that every morning and evening lived becomes part of the path to freedom. The fourth Stoic exercise is voluntary limitations. Seneca advised that at least a few days each month, one should eat simple food, wear coarse clothing, and ask oneself, "Is this really what I feared so much?" Such practice is not meant for self-denial, but to strengthen the will and to remind us that we are capable of living without excess. A modern person can try simple steps. Turn off the phone for a few hours, walk instead of driving, give up usual comfort food for just one day. These exercises teach that freedom is not in always having conveniences, but in not being their slave. When we voluntarily give up what we normally consider necessary, we reclaim power and confidence. It turns out we can live without it, and therefore we are free. All these practices share one goal: strengthening inner control and forming true freedom. When we learn to distinguish between mine and not mine, we stop fighting the world where it is beyond our power. When we begin the morning with a reminder that the day will bring challenges, we meet it calmer and stronger. When we review the day in the evening, we see our growth and mistakes and become wiser. When we introduce voluntary limitations, we strengthen our will and stop fearing deprivation. These simple steps create space for inner freedom, even in the modern world, full of dependencies and distractions. And although they may seem small, it is precisely such daily exercises that give long-term results. Stoic philosophy teaches that freedom is not a one-time choice, but a way of life, and practice is the only path to it. Every person can start small, and gradually this smallness grows into enduring strength. And this is the real victory over oneself. Step by step, turning philosophy from words into action and gaining the freedom that neither time, nor circumstances, nor people can take away. And now we come to the most important point, the conclusion the Stoics left us as a guide. True freedom is not a life without rules, not the ability to do whatever one wants, and not the absence of limitations. True freedom is living according to one's inner principles, which do not fluctuate with circumstances and do not collapse because of others' words or actions. The world will always change, bringing difficulties, deprivation, surprises, and challenges. But it is precisely in these changes that our inner strength is tested. Free is not the one who has forced reality to obey, but the one who can remain himself under any circumstances. This freedom arises from discipline, from the ability to control oneself, from a clear distinction between what is mine and what is not, from the readiness to accept the inevitable and calmly work with what is in our hands. The Stoics taught that fate may take much from us: wealth, position, health, even loved ones. But no one and nothing can take away our ability to choose how we will respond. And here lies true power and genuine freedom. Because when you are not controlled by fear, anger, greed, or despair, you become the master of yourself and therefore truly free. But philosophy should not remain only in words. If you want to feel this freedom, start small. Do not wait for a special moment. Do not postpone until tomorrow. Today you will encounter many situations where you can test yourself. Someone will say something harsh, and you can choose not to respond with irritation. The temptation for fleeting pleasure will arise, and you can choose to resist it. A thought that the world must be the way you want will appear, and you can choose to let it go. Every time you choose a reaction for which only you are responsible, you take a step toward freedom, small but real. Freedom does not come suddenly. It is built from these small choices, which day by day form your strength. So ask yourself, what am I ready to choose today? What am I ready to let go of? Where am I ready to take responsibility for myself? This is how inner freedom is born, which depends neither on circumstances, nor on others' opinions, nor on the future. True freedom is being yourself, relying on your principles, and moving forward with clarity and dignity. Start small. Today, choose at least one reaction for which only you are responsible. And with this step, you have already come closer to freedom.